Hello and welcome. The hero's path never truly ends, does it? You defeated Servok and Shev in the depths beneath Baldur's gate, exposed his conspiracy to ignite war across the Sword Coast, and saved countless lives from the machinations of a Ballspawn seeking godhood. The people celebrated. They called you Savior, Champion, the one who ended the Iron Crisis and prevented catastrophic conflict. But celebration fades quickly in a world where peace is as fleeting as morning mist, and you are about to discover that some victories merely set the stage for greater trials. 3 months have passed since Servok's death. 3 months since you stood in that chamber beneath the city, your blade still wet with the blood of your half-brother, your heart heavy with the knowledge of what you truly are, a child of Baal, the dead god of murder. One among many scattered across Faerun, each carrying a fragment of divine essence within their mortal shells. The revelation still haunts your quieter moments when the crowds disperse and you are left alone with thoughts that refuse to be silenced. Baldur's gate itself has transformed in the wake of recent events. The city's Grand Dukes work tirelessly to restore confidence in the city's institutions, to repair the damage done by Servok's infiltration of the Iron Throne and his manipulation of the Flaming Fist mercenary company. Markets bustle again, with merchants selling goods forged from iron, no longer artificially scarce. The docks welcome ships from distant ports, their holds full of trade goods rather than weapons of war. Children play in streets where soldiers once marched with grim purpose. On the surface, normalcy returns. But beneath that veneer of recovered prosperity, tensions simmer. The lower city still bears scars from the chaos of the Iron Crisis. Families mourn loved ones lost to assassins, to battles, to the desperation that hunger and fear inevitably breed. The Flaming Fist struggles to rebuild its reputation. After Servok's corruption exposed how easily Baldur's Gate's primary military force could be manipulated. Trust, once shattered, does not heal as quickly as broken bones or damaged buildings. Your own position remains complicated. The Grand Dukes publicly honor you as the city's savior, but political realities create distance between proclamation and genuine acceptance. You are a hero, yes, but you are also a wild card, an adventurer whose power exceeds comfortable boundaries, whose actions cannot be controlled by decree or law. Some council members view you with gratitude. Others see you as a potential threat, especially those who have learned whispers of your true heritage. After all, you share blood with the same monster you defeated. What prevents you from following Servok's path? You have established yourself at a small estate outside the city proper, a modest dwelling that provides privacy without complete isolation from civilization. Your companions from the journey that ended with Servok's defeat have largely dispersed, each pursuing their own paths now that immediate danger has passed. Some remain nearby. Others have traveled to distant lands. The bonds forged in shared peril endure, daily life demands different rhythms than constant adventure provides. The Sword Coast region itself experiences an uneasy peace. To the north, Waterdeep maintains its position as the greatest city along the western shores of Faerûn. The Lords of Waterdeep watch events in Baldur's Gate with keen interest, aware that instability in one major city inevitably affects trade and politics across the entire region. To the south, Athkatla in Am pursues its own commercial interests, while smaller settlements scattered between the great cities try to recover from the disruptions of recent years. Trade routes that were disrupted during the Iron Crisis slowly return to full operation. Merchants who had abandoned dangerous roads venture forth again, their caravans protected by hired guards wary of bandits who proliferated during the chaos. Farms that suffered from the shortage of quality tools begin to produce abundant harvests once more. The natural resilience of civilization reasserts itself, people demonstrating that remarkable capacity to rebuild, to continue, to hope for better futures, even after experiencing darkness. But new darkness gathers on the horizon. Refugees begin arriving at Baldur's Gate's walls. Not the usual trickle of displaced persons that any major city attracts, but steady streams of frightened people carrying whatever possessions they could salvage. They come from settlements to the northeast, from small villages and farming communities that dot the landscape between Baldur's Gate and the ruined, keep known as Dragonspear Castle. Their stories share common elements: armed forces marching through their lands, demands for supplies and support, homes burned when cooperation was not immediately forthcoming. The refugees speak of a crusade, a holy army gathering under the banner of a mysterious leader they call the Shining Lady. This army, they say, numbers in the thousands and grows larger each day as zealots and true believers flock to join what they perceive as a righteous cause. The crusade marches not with the discipline of a trained military force, but with the fervent energy of religious conviction, which makes them simultaneously less predictable and more dangerous. Initial reports reaching Baldur's Gate's council chambers downplay the threat. Small groups of religious fanatics appear regularly across Faerûn. After all, most burning out quickly when their promised revelations fail to materialize, or their leaders prove to be charlatans seeking profit rather than spiritual truth. The Grand Dukes have more immediate concerns: rebuilding trust, managing the city's recovery, dealing with the political fallout from Servok's conspiracy. A distant crusade seems like a problem that will resolve itself, or, at worst, become someone else's responsibility. But the refugee flow increases. What begins as a few dozen displaced persons becomes hundreds, then more. They overwhelm the charitable resources of temples and civic organizations attempting to provide aid. They crowd into the lower city's poorest districts, competing with Baldur's Gate's own impoverished citizens for scarce housing and employment. The social pressure builds as resources stretch thin and resentment grows between established residents and desperate newcomers. The Crusades' leader emerges from rumor into clearer focus through the accounts of those who have seen her. Kalar Argent, they call her, and this time the name is accurate. Descriptions paint her as a figure of terrible beauty and fierce conviction. An Aasimar clad in golden armor that seems to capture and reflect sunlight even under cloudy skies. She speaks of a holy mission, of righting ancient wrongs, of a quest that requires sacrifice from all who would see justice done in the world. What exactly Kalar seeks remains maddeningly vague in early reports. She speaks in grand spiritual language about redemption and salvation, about correcting a cosmic injustice that has gone unanswered for too long. Her followers embrace these vague proclamations with passionate intensity, their faith apparently requiring no specific details to sustain their devotion. They believe absolutely in her righteousness, in the necessity of their cause, in the promise that their sacrifices serve a greater good. The crusade establishes camps near the ruins of Dragonspear Castle, a location heavy with dark history. Centuries ago, around the year 1255 Dale Reckoning, a half-dwarf adventurer named Darrow's Dragonspear retired in the lair of the copper dragon Halatathlair and built the castle that would bear his name. But the castle's later history became far darker. Devils established presence there, and in 1356 Dale Reckoning, they were ousted in what became known as the Dragonspear War. The victory proved temporary. In 1363 Dale Reckoning, devils retook Dragonspear Castle and led an army that threatened the entire region before being defeated again. Dragonspear Castle's history connects to the lower planes, to attempts by mortal wizards and devils to breach the barriers between the material world and the Nine Hells. A portal existed within the castle, a gateway to Avernus, the first layer of the Nine Hells. This portal made the location perpetually dangerous, a thin point in reality where infernal influence could seep through. Local populations have long avoided the area, preferring to travel by longer routes rather than risk whatever might lurk among the broken stones and collapsed towers. That Kalar chooses such a place for her base of operations suggests either detailed knowledge of its history or dangerous ignorance of what she risks awakening. The Flaming Fist sends scouts to assess the situation as reports become too numerous and detailed to ignore. These scouts return with concerning intelligence. The crusade numbers in the thousands, with new recruits arriving daily from across the Sword Coast and beyond. They construct fortifications around Dragonspear's ruins with surprising efficiency for a supposedly spiritual movement. Supply lines stretch back toward the northeast, suggesting organization and planning that exceeds the capabilities of a simple religious movement led by a charismatic mystic. More troubling, the crusade demonstrates genuine military capability. They have not merely gathered a mob of faithful believers, but have organized them into structured units with clear command hierarchies. They drill in combat formations. They establish patrol routes and defensive perimeters. They deploy scouts and foraging parties with tactical precision. Whatever Kalar Argent may be, she apparently possesses genuine military experience or has recruited commanders who do. The Shining Crusade represents a legitimate military force, not a collection of deluded zealots who will scatter at the first sign of real opposition. The Grand Dukes of Baldur's Gate face a deteriorating situation. The refugee crisis strains the city's resources and social cohesion. The crusade shows no signs of disbanding or moderating its activities. Trade routes to the northeast become increasingly dangerous as crusade foraging parties appropriate supplies from merchant caravans, leaving just enough that the merchants survive to spread word of the Crusade's power. Small settlements caught in the Crusade's path face impossible choices: provide support and supplies, or risk destruction. Political divisions within Baldur's Gate's ruling council prevent unified action. Some Grand Dukes advocate for immediate military response, arguing that allowing the crusade to continue growing only makes eventual confrontation more costly. Others counsel patience, suggesting that the crusade may exhaust itself or turn its attention elsewhere if not provoked. Still, others propose diplomatic engagement, sending envoys to negotiate with Kalar and determine what she actually wants. What might satisfy her mysterious quest without requiring military conflict? The city's military options remain limited despite being a major power on the Sword Coast. The Flaming Fist, while numerous, continues recovering from the corruption exposed during Servok's conspiracy. Officers dismissed for involvement in the Iron Thrones, schemes left gaps in leadership not easily filled. Ordinary soldiers question which commanders they can trust, creating hesitation and inefficiency in a force that depends on clear chains of command and instant obedience. Baldur's Gate could field an army, but whether that army would perform effectively in actual combat remains uncertain. Meanwhile, you attempt to maintain a life beyond constant crisis. You train with weapons and magic, keeping skills sharp through practice rather than necessity. You read books salvaged from your time at Candlekeep, finding comfort in scholarship even as your life has diverged far from the scholarly path you once imagined following. You occasionally visit the city, conducting business or meeting with companions who remain in the area. You try, without complete success, to ignore the growing sense that peace represents only temporary respite before the next crisis demands your involvement. The summons from the Grand Dukes arrives on a gray morning. A messenger in Baldur's Gate's official livery rides to your estate with a sealed letter requesting your presence at the palace to discuss matters of urgent importance to the city. The letter's language remains formally polite, but you recognize the underlying reality. The Grand Dukes need your help. The crusade has grown beyond their capacity to ignore or manage through conventional means, and they turn to the person who defeated Servak when conventional approaches failed before. You could refuse. You have earned rest, earned the right to pursue a life not defined by constant battle against overwhelming threats. No law compels you to serve Baldur's Gate's interests beyond what your own conscience dictates. The city has given you honor and modest rewards, but not loyalty binding enough to override personal choice. You could turn away, let the Grand Dukes solve their own problems. Let some other hero emerge to face whatever challenges the shining crusade represents. But you understand, with the weary certainty of someone who has walked this path before, that refusal merely delays the inevitable. If the crusade truly threatens the Sword Coast's stability, you will eventually be drawn into conflict regardless of initial choices. Better to engage on your own terms, with some control over timing and circumstances, than to be forced into desperate reaction when situations deteriorate beyond any possibility of favorable resolution. Better to act while options still exist than to wait until only the worst choices remain. You prepare to return to Baldur's Gate, to answer the summons, to learn what the Grand Dukes want from you. You gather traveling gear, select weapons and equipment appropriate for potentially dangerous travel. Mentally review which companions might be available if this develops into something requiring more than diplomatic discussion. The familiar routines of preparation for uncertain adventure feel both comfortable and exhausting. The contradiction of someone who has found their calling in work they wish they could abandon. The road to Baldur's Gate takes you through countryside, still showing signs of recovery from the Iron Crisis. Fields that lay fallow during the worst of the chaos now bear crops, though yields remain below historical levels. Villages you pass through have rebuilt damaged structures, but new wood and fresh plaster stand out against weathered materials, marking where destruction required replacement. People wave or offer respectful greetings as you pass, some recognizing you, others simply showing the courtesy that travelers traditionally receive in civilized lands. You reach Baldur's Gate as afternoon sun begins its descent toward the horizon. The city walls rise impressively, testament to the wealth and military power concentrated within. Guards at the gates recognize you and allow passage, without the usual questions and inspections imposed on common travelers. The streets inside remain crowded with merchants, craftspeople, citizens pursuing daily business, all the chaotic energy that defines a major urban center. You make your way toward the upper city where the Grand Palace stands, where power resides and decisions affecting thousands of lives get made by people who rarely face direct consequences of those decisions. The palace interior displays wealth without excessive ostentation, impressive enough to remind visitors of Baldur's Gate's importance, while avoiding the kind of decadent luxury that breeds resentment among poorer citizens. Servants guide you through corridors toward the council chambers where the Grand Dukes await. You notice increased security presence, more guards than you remember from previous visits, suggesting the leaders remain nervous about potential threats after Servok's infiltration exposed their vulnerability. The council chamber doors open, and you step forward to learn what new crisis demands a hero's intervention. What impossible task will once again fall to you, because no one else possesses the combination of ability, reputation, and willingness necessary to attempt what reasonable people would refuse. The Grand Dukes wait, and with them, the beginning of another journey into darkness that you cannot avoid and dare not refuse. Section 2. The Shining Lady and Her Holy War. The council chamber feels heavy with tension as you take your position before the assembled Grand Dukes. They sit in their elevated seats, faces showing varying degrees of concern, frustration, and poorly concealed fear. Duke Entar Silvershield speaks first, his aged voice carrying the weight of decades spent navigating Baldur's Gate's complex political landscape. He describes the deteriorating situation in terms both diplomatic and stark. The Shining Crusade represents an existential threat to regional stability, and conventional military responses have failed to slow its growth. The Grand Dukes present what intelligence they have gathered, and the picture emerging from disparate reports proves more troubling than you initially anticipated. Kalar Argent commands absolute loyalty from thousands of followers who believe her cause justifies any sacrifice. She promises redemption, salvation for souls trapped in eternal torment through circumstances beyond their control. Her crusade marches not toward conquest of territory or accumulation of wealth, but toward Dragonspear Castle and whatever lies beyond those cursed ruins. The vagueness of her ultimate goal paradoxically strengthens her followers' devotion, allowing each to project their own desperate hopes onto her grand promises. But who is Kalar Argent? Where did she come from? And what drives this woman to lead thousands into potential death for a cause she describes only in mystical abstractions? The answers, pieced together from multiple sources, reveal a tragedy that spans decades and reaches back to events that occurred long before you were born. Kalar Argent was born an Aasimar, a being touched by celestial bloodlines that marked her as different from ordinary mortals from her first breath. Her divine heritage manifested in an otherworldly beauty and natural charisma that made her stand out even among the nobility into which she was born. The Argent family held wealth and influence in the regions northeast of Baldur's Gate, their estates and holdings providing comfortable lives, insulated from the harsh realities facing common folk. Her transformation from privileged Aasimar into zealot leader began with a personal tragedy during one of the conflicts at Dragonspear Castle. Historical records indicate that Dragonspear has been the site of multiple battles against infernal forces, with significant conflicts occurring in 1300 and 56 Dale Reckoning, and again in 1300 and 63 Dale Reckoning. During one of these terrible battles, a crusade formed to stop devils from using the castle as a staging ground for invasion from the Nine Hells. The crusade succeeded in its primary objective, preventing the invasion and destroying much of the infrastructure that would have allowed devils to pour through dimensional barriers into Faerun. But victory came at terrible cost. Hundreds of crusaders died in the fighting around Dragonspear Castle. Many more suffered fates arguably worse than death, their souls claimed by devils and dragged into the Nine Hells to face eternal torment. The barriers between planes, already weakened by the invasion attempt, proved porous enough that devils could seize dying crusaders' essences, even as their mortal bodies fell on material soil. Heroes who gave their lives to save the world found themselves condemned to suffering without end. Rewards for sacrifice consisting of damnation rather than any celestial rest. Someone very close to Kalar numbered among those who marched to Dragonspear and never returned. Based on what is known of her history, this could have been a family member she held dear, someone who embodied everything noble and righteous about defending the innocent against darkness. This person's loss devastated the young Kalar, refusing to accept that such cosmic injustice could stand unanswered. The trauma fundamentally altered Kalar's personality and life trajectory. She became consumed by the fate of those taken at Dragonspear, spending years researching planar metaphysics, studying accounts of the battles there, consulting with priests and scholars about the nature of souls and the mechanics of damnation. She liquidated portions of her inheritance to fund expeditions to Dragonspear's ruins, seeking any means to breach the barriers between planes and reach the Nine Hells, where lost souls remained trapped. Most who suffer similar losses eventually find acceptance or channel their grief into more conventional religious devotion. Kalar instead developed an absolute conviction that she could and must personally rescue those souls taken during the Dragonspear conflicts. She came to believe that the gods themselves had failed these heroes, that divine inaction in the face of such cosmic injustice revealed fundamental flaws in the moral order of the universe. If the gods would not act, she would. If the righteous powers of the multiverse deemed those souls irretrievably lost, she would prove them wrong. Her conviction attracted followers. Word spread of the awesomer noblewoman who refused to accept the damnation of Dragonspear's fallen, who dedicated her considerable resources and indomitable will to attempting the impossible. Others who had lost loved ones in those ancient battles found in Kalar someone who validated their grief, who insisted their losses mattered enough to warrant extraordinary action. Gradually, a movement formed around her, small at first, but growing as her message resonated with those who felt abandoned by conventional religion's promises of divine justice. Kaler presented a compelling figure to potential recruits. Her celestial heritage gave her an otherworldly presence that seemed to validate claims of divine purpose. Beautiful and charismatic, she spoke with passionate intensity about righting cosmic wrongs, about the moral imperative to save souls unjustly condemned. She argued that heroic sacrifice should be rewarded, not punished, that those who gave their lives defending the innocent deserved rescue rather than abandonment. Her message contained enough truth to prove difficult to dismiss entirely. The souls taken at Dragonspear had indeed died heroically. Their fates did seem unjust according to any reasonable moral framework. But Kaler's proposed solution revealed dangerous obsession rather than practical wisdom. She intended to breach the barriers between the material plane and the nine hells, to lead an army into Avernus itself, and forcibly extract the souls she sought to save. The plan's audacity exceeded anything attempted in recorded history. The nine hells represented ultimate evil's home territory, ruled by archdevils of unimaginable power, defended by legions of devils, whose entire existence centered on warfare and domination. To march mortal armies into such a realm courted absolute disaster. Reasonable objections failed to sway Kaler or her growing number of followers. When priests explained that souls claimed by the nine hells could not be simply extracted through force of arms, that infernal law and the metaphysical nature of damnation created complications beyond military solutions, Kaler dismissed their concerns as cowardice or lack of faith. When military advisors pointed out that mortal armies would be slaughtered in the nine hells, she responded that true believers would prevail through righteousness and dedication, where mere soldiers would fail. The Shining Crusade began forming in earnest in the years leading up to your confrontation with Servak. Kaler started recruiting openly, sending agents across the Sword Coast to spread her message and gather followers to her cause. She established her base near Dragonspear Castle's ruins, recognizing that location's symbolic and practical importance. The castle sat near the site where dimensional barriers had been breached before, where the fabric of reality remained weak enough that someone with sufficient knowledge and power might tear it open again. Her recruitment efforts targeted specific populations. She sought relatives of those who died in the Dragonspear conflicts, people carrying similar grief and anger at cosmic injustice. She recruited from refugee populations displaced by various conflicts, people desperate for purpose and hope in lives disrupted by forces beyond their control. She attracted religious zealots dissatisfied with mainstream faiths, approaches to evil and suffering. Individuals convinced that more direct action was needed to combat darkness in the world. The Crusade's composition reflected this diverse recruitment. Knights and paladins who felt traditional orders had grown too cautious and bureaucratic joined Kaler's cause. Common soldiers seeking glory and purpose enlisted in her army. Priests and clerics disillusioned with their deities, seeming indifference to mortal suffering, brought divine magic to support the crusade. Wizards and sorcerers interested in planar magic saw opportunity to study forces normally inaccessible to mortal researchers. Ordinary people, farmers and craftspeople and laborers, abandoned their previous lives to join what they believed represented a righteous, holy war. Kaler's key commanders brought varied skills and motivations to the crusade. Some genuinely shared her convictions about the injustice facing Dragonspear's fallen heroes. Others saw opportunity for advancement and power in a growing military movement. A few harbored secret agendas, using the crusade as cover for their own schemes, while paying lip service to Kaler's stated goals. One particularly significant figure emerged as Kaler's closest advisor. Heffernan, a half-elven sorcerer whose magical expertise proved invaluable to the Crusade's goals. He claimed to possess knowledge of planar magic and dimensional barriers, understanding that could help Kaler achieve her seemingly impossible objective of breaching the 9 hells. His counsel guided much of the Crusade's strategic planning. His spells supported their operations, and his reassurances maintained Kaler's conviction when doubts might otherwise have emerged. The Crusade's impact on innocent populations proved devastating despite Kaler's claims to noble purpose. Her army required enormous quantities of food, water, equipment, and supplies to sustain thousands of followers marching toward Dragonspear. Official policy stated that the crusade would pay fair prices for provisions and respect local populations. Reality proved far uglier. Foraging parties stripped farms bare of crops and livestock, leaving families to face starvation. Villages that refused to provide supplies found themselves burned, their populations scattered or killed. The crusade justified these atrocities through twisted logic. Anyone who opposed their righteous mission must be aligned with evil, deserving of whatever punishment befell them. Resistance equaled collaboration with devils, warranted immediate and harsh response. Refugees fled ahead of the Crusade's advance, carrying tales of burning homes and murdered neighbors. They described crusaders who seemed to believe absolutely in their righteousness, even as they committed acts indistinguishable from banditry. They spoke of Kaler herself, observing these excesses with apparent indifference. Her focus so fixated on her ultimate goal that collateral suffering barely registered as worthy of concern. Religious authorities across the Sword Coast struggled to respond to the Crusade's claims. Kaler positioned her movement as more righteous than conventional faiths, arguing that the gods' failure to rescue Dragonspear's heroes proved divine inadequacy or indifference. Her message appealed to those who had prayed for divine intervention in their own lives, without receiving answers, who had suffered losses, while priests offered only platitudes about mysterious divine plans and the necessity of faith through hardship. Some faiths condemned the crusade outright, declaring it blasphemous to suggest that mortals could accomplish what gods would not. That Kaler's hubris bordered on the same kind of arrogance that attracted infernal corruption in the first place. They argued that even if souls were trapped in the 9 hells, attempting to rescue them through military invasion of the lower planes represented folly that would only create more suffering and damnation. Other religious leaders took more nuanced positions, acknowledging that Kaler's core complaint about injustice contained validity, while condemning her proposed solution. They attempted to offer alternative paths to addressing her grief, suggesting memorial services, magical attempts to communicate with trapped souls, or diplomatic approaches that might negotiate releases. Kaler rejected all such suggestions as inadequate half-measures, insufficient responses to absolute injustice. The philosophical implications of the crusade extended beyond immediate political or military concerns. Kaler's movement raised fundamental questions about mortal agency versus divine authority, about the limits of righteous action, about whether ends could justify means when those ends involved preventing eternal suffering. Her arguments possessed enough sophistication to trouble even those who recognized the practical impossibility of her goals. These questions attracted intellectuals and philosophers to the crusade alongside simple believers motivated by emotion rather than abstract reasoning. Universities and temples found themselves hosting debates about the Crusade's theological implications, arguments that sometimes turned violent when passions overwhelmed scholarly detachment. The Crusade forced confrontation with uncomfortable truths about divine morality and mortal helplessness that most preferred to avoid through comfortable platitudes. Kaler herself became a figure of legend and mystery as the crusade grew. Those who encountered her personally reported an individual of absolute conviction, someone who radiated certainty with an intensity that proved difficult to resist. She spoke eloquently about her mission, describing visions that supposedly showed her the suffering of souls trapped in Avernus. She claimed these visions proved the truth of her cause, though whether such visions represented genuine divine revelation, magical illusion, or grief-induced delusion remained impossible to determine from outside observation. Her golden armor became iconic, described in countless reports from refugees and crusaders alike. The armor seemed to glow with inner light, reflecting and amplifying any illumination, until Kaler appeared wrapped in radiance even during cloudy days or twilight hours. Whether this effect resulted from magical enchantment, her celestial heritage, or simple skilled craftsmanship remained uncertain. But the visual impact proved undeniable. She looked the part of a holy warrior leading righteous crusade, and appearance mattered enormously in attracting and maintaining followers. Beneath the charismatic exterior, however, observers who managed close contact reported troubling signs of obsession, overwhelming judgment. Kaler tolerated no dissent from her ultimate goal, dismissing any suggestion that her plans might be flawed or that alternative approaches deserved consideration. Advisors who raised concerns found themselves marginalized or expelled from her inner circle. She measured all actions solely by whether they advanced her mission, showing indifference to suffering that did not directly relate to rescuing Dragonspear souls. The Crusade's true goal, the specific plan for breaching the 9 hells and rescuing trapped souls, remained unclear to most followers. Kaler spoke in grand abstractions about opening the way, about marching into Avernus itself, about confronting the powers that held captured souls, but practical details stayed vague, known only to her innermost circle of advisors. Ordinary crusaders marched toward Dragonspear on faith alone, trusting that their leader possessed specific knowledge and plans that would be revealed when the time came. This vagueness served multiple purposes. It prevented enemies from learning enough to effectively counter the Crusade's objectives. It allowed followers to imagine whatever specific scenario best matched their personal hopes and beliefs. It protected Kaler from challenges based on logical analysis of her plans, since no one could argue against details that remained secret. The mystique surrounding her ultimate intentions became part of her appeal, interpreted as proof of wisdom beyond common understanding, rather than evidence of potentially reckless planning. As the crusade swelled to thousands of followers and began fortifying positions around Dragonspear Castle, the Sword Coast's political powers finally recognized the magnitude of the threat. This represented no mere collection of religious extremists who would disperse after their leaders' inevitable failure became obvious. Kaler commanded a genuine army, organized and supplied, growing stronger with each passing week. If she actually succeeded in breaching the barriers to the 9 hells, consequences could prove catastrophic regardless of whether she achieved her stated goal of rescuing souls. Opening portals to the 9 hells invited disaster. Devils did not passively wait for mortals to invade their realm. They exploited any breach between planes to extend their own influence, to corrupt mortal souls, to establish permanent footholds in the material world. The previous Dragonspear conflicts had nearly resulted in full-scale infernal invasion before heroic sacrifice closed the gates. Kaler proposed deliberately opening those same gates, gambling that she could control forces that had required hundreds of heroes' deaths to contain previously. Intelligence gathering efforts intensified as Baldur's Gate and other regional powers attempted to learn specifics about the Crusade's capabilities and intentions. Spies infiltrated Crusader camps, Though few returned with useful information, Kaler's security proved remarkably effective, identifying and eliminating infiltrators with efficiency, suggesting either magical detection methods or simply the paranoid zealotry of true believers, spotting anyone who failed to demonstrate sufficient fervor. Those spies who did return painted concerning pictures of crusader morale and dedication. These were not reluctant conscripts forced to serve through threats or coercion. They believed absolutely in Kaler's righteousness, in the necessity of their mission, in the promise that their actions would save souls from eternal torment. They trained with grim determination, accepting hardships as tests of their commitment. They spoke of the coming confrontation not with fear, but with eager anticipation, convinced they participated in cosmic justice finally being served. The Crusades' supply situation remained surprisingly robust despite the army's size. Donations from sympathizers across the Sword Coast provided steady resource flows. Conquered territories yielded provisions through forced requisitions. Merchants willing to overlook the Crusades' darker aspects sold supplies at inflated prices, profit overcoming moral considerations. The logistical challenge of feeding and equipping thousands proved manageable through combination of systematic exploitation and genuine popular support from those who agreed with Kaler's message. Attempts at diplomatic engagement failed repeatedly. Envoys sent to negotiate with Kaler found her unwilling to discuss anything beyond complete support for her goals or absolute opposition. She offered no middle ground, no compromise positions that might have reduced tensions. You either joined the crusade or stood, revealed as someone who accepted cosmic injustice, who lacked the moral courage to fight for trapped souls. Her worldview admitted no nuance, only absolute commitment or absolute betrayal. As you listen to the Grand Dukes describe all this information, the weight of the situation settles over you. This is not a problem susceptible to simple solutions. Kaler Argent commands a legitimate military force motivated by beliefs that contain kernels of truth wrapped in dangerous delusion. Defeating her army would require significant bloodshed, potentially destabilizing the entire region. But allowing her to continue risked even greater catastrophe if she succeeded in opening portals to the Nine Hells. The Grand Dukes want you to stop the crusade, to find some way to prevent disaster without causing the kind of full-scale war that would devastate the Sword Coast. They want you to accomplish the impossible again because you have done so before. They look at you with expressions mixing hope and desperation, understanding that you represent perhaps their last chance to resolve this crisis before it escalates beyond any possibility of control. You stand before them, silent, considering. The crusade marches toward Dragonspear. Kaler Argent pursues her obsessive quest to rescue souls she believes trapped in the Nine Hells. thousands of followers believe absolutely in her righteousness. The 9 Hells wait beyond thinning barriers between planes, and you, once again, find yourself positioned at the intersection of catastrophe and slim hope, expected to save a world that never quite stops needing salvation. Section 3. The Path of Blood and Betrayal. The Grand Dukes commission you to lead an expedition north along the coastway, to investigate the Crusades' movements and support coalition efforts to contain Kaler's army without igniting total war. They provide official documentation authorizing you to act in Baldur's Gate's name, to recruit companions as needed, and to coordinate with Flaming Fist commanders already stationed at strategic positions. The mandate sounds clear on parchment, but you recognize the impossible balance they ask you to strike. Prevent catastrophe without starting the very conflict everyone fears. You gather companions for this journey, reaching out to those whose skills and loyalty you trust. Khalid and Jaira answer your call, their connection to the Harpers making them particularly valuable for this mission. The Harpers have been tracking the Shining Crusade with growing alarm, their information networks suggesting layers of conspiracy beneath the surface righteousness Kaler projects. Other allies join as well, each bringing unique capabilities that will prove essential in the trials ahead. Your departure from Baldur's Gate takes you northeast along the coastway, the major trade route connecting the city to interior regions. Under normal circumstances, this road bustles with merchant caravans, travelers, and the steady flow of commerce that sustains the Sword Coast's prosperity. Now, the traffic consists primarily of refugees fleeing south toward Baldur's Gate's relative safety, and military convoys moving north to reinforce positions against Crusader advances. The coastway forest stretches for miles along your route, dense woodland that has traditionally sheltered small communities living at comfortable distance from major cities. The forest roads wind between ancient trees, crossing streams and clearings where villages have stood for generations. But the Crusades' passage has transformed this peaceful landscape into something darker and more desperate. Refugee camps appear along the roadside with increasing frequency as you penetrate deeper into the forest. Families huddle around inadequate fires, their possessions reduced to whatever they could carry during flight from their homes. Children watch with hollow eyes as you pass, their normal childhood replaced by hunger and fear. The adults tell similar stories when you stop to speak with them, variations on themes of Crusader demands, burned homes, and neighbors who disappeared after refusing cooperation or attempting resistance. One woman describes Crusaders arriving at her village claiming they served a holy cause, that supporting their mission meant participating in cosmic justice. When village elders questioned what specific goal justified such demands, the Crusaders responded with violence, burning homes as examples and seizing supplies without payment. The woman's husband tried to protect their livestock and was beaten so severely he could not travel when the family fled. She does not know if he still lives, whether he was taken by the Crusaders or left to die in the ruins of their home. These stories accumulate as you travel, each adding weight to your understanding of the Crusades' true impact. Whatever nobility Kaler claims for her mission, her army brings suffering to people who want nothing to do with plainer theology or ancient heroic souls. The crusade consumes everything in its path, transforming the Sword Coast into a war zone where ordinary people become casualties of someone else's obsession. The Coastway crossing marks your first major strategic position. A stone bridge spanning a significant river that handles most trade traffic between Baldur's Gate and northeastern settlements. The crossing has been fortified, flaming fist troops reinforcing the original garrison to prevent Crusader seizure of this vital choke point. Commander Bence Duncan leads the defense, a veteran officer whose frustration with his impossible orders shows clearly in his face and manner. Duncan explains the situation with brutal honesty. His orders require holding the crossing without provoking open warfare if it can be avoided. Crusader forces camp within sight on the far bank, close enough that both sides can observe each other's daily routines. Neither has initiated combat, both apparently waiting for orders or circumstances that might justify breaking the tense peace. The result is two armed forces facing each other across a narrow bridge, both prepared for battle, but neither willing to fire the first shot that would escalate tension into slaughter. The garrison commander recognizes your reputation and welcomes your arrival as potential reinforcement if fighting erupts. He shares intelligence gathered through scouts and occasional deserters from Crusader ranks. The Crusade maintains major camps at several strategic locations, with Bridgefort and Dragonspear Castle representing their primary strongholds. Supply lines run between these positions and back to recruitment centers and resource-gathering operations scattered across the region. You question deserters that Duncan's forces have captured, seeking to understand what motivates ordinary crusaders beyond the propaganda and grand rhetoric. Their answers reveal complicated mixtures of genuine faith, desperate hope, and simple need for belonging. Some truly believe Kaler will rescue souls from the nine hells, that her cause represents cosmic justice finally being served. Others admit uncertainty about specific goals, but trust that their leader possesses wisdom beyond common understanding. A few fled after witnessing atrocities that shattered their faith. Unable to reconcile the righteous mission, they joined with the evil actions they were ordered to commit. It is during your time near the Coastway crossing that you first encounter the figure who will haunt your journey toward Dragonspear. He appears without warning, a man wrapped in concealing robes and hood that shadows his features beyond recognition. He speaks to you directly, addressing you by name, referencing details of your past that no stranger should possess. His words carry cryptic warnings about betrayal and destiny, about forces manipulating events toward purposes you do not yet understand. This hooded man seems to exist partially outside normal reality. He appears and vanishes without using doors or visible magic, materializing in supposedly secure locations, as though physical barriers mean nothing to him. Attempts to detain or unmask him fail, your hands passing through empty air when you try to grab his robes, spells sliding off whatever protections he maintains. His presence feels wrong in ways you cannot articulate, familiar yet alien, as though he knows you far more intimately than any brief encounter could explain. His warnings speak of conspiracies reaching into Baldur's Gate's highest levels, of those who secretly want outcomes that serve neither the crusade nor the coalition's stated goals. He suggests that visible conflicts mask deeper schemes, that true danger comes from unexpected directions. You do not know whether to trust these warnings or dismiss them as manipulation from yet another player with hidden agendas, based on how he speaks about your nature as a ballspawn, about your power and what it represents. This could imply that he has been studying you for purposes that extend far beyond the immediate crisis at Dragonspear. Pressing forward from the coastway crossing, you journey deeper into contested territory. The landscape bears increasingly visible scars of the Crusade's passage. Fields lie trampled by marching armies. Crops destroyed before harvest could sustain the families who planted them. Orchards show signs of systematic stripping, fruit taken to feed crusaders, regardless of whether trees survived the aggressive harvesting. Small settlements stand abandoned, their inhabitants fled or forcibly displaced, buildings already deteriorating without maintenance. Bridgefort emerges as your next major objective, a fortified position controlling another crucial crossing and section of road. The fort has long served as a way station and defensive stronghold, protecting trade routes. Its walls and garrison providing security that allowed commerce to flow safely through otherwise dangerous territory. The Crusade recognizes Bridgefort's strategic value and has moved to secure it, either through conquest or coercion. When you approach Bridgefort, you discover a complex situation that defies simple categorization as siege or occupation. The fort remains partially under control of its original defenders, but Crusader forces have established strong presence both inside and around the position. Some defenders have been persuaded or coerced into cooperating with the Crusade. Others resist quietly, waiting for relief or opportunity to reclaim full control. The result is a tense standoff where multiple factions maneuver within the same space, each seeking advantage while avoiding the final confrontation that would resolve the situation through violence. Your involvement at Bridgefort requires navigating these competing interests and determining how best to serve Baldur's Gate's objectives without triggering the bloodbath that seems increasingly inevitable. You can attempt to reinforce loyal defenders, to evacuate those unwilling to serve the crusade, to negotiate arrangements that preserve lives while denying Kalar strategic advantage. Each choice carries consequences that ripple forward, affecting not just Bridgefort, but the broader campaign. Inside the fort, you encounter crusaders firsthand, observing their daily routines and hearing their rhetoric delivered without the filtering of second-hand reports. Priests conduct services that emphasize Kalar's righteousness, the nobility of rescuing unjustly damned souls, the promise that those who die in this cause will receive celestial reward rather than risking the fate that befell Dragonspear's ancient heroes. The sermons prove seductive even when you know their fundamental flaws, demonstrating the power of well-crafted appeals to justice and compassion. You also meet soldiers who genuinely believe in what they do, who see themselves as warriors for good despite the suffering their army inflicts. They speak of Kalar with reverence bordering on worship, describing her as someone who cares enough about cosmic injustice to risk everything correcting it. When you point out the refugees, the burned villages, the families torn apart by the Crusade's demands, they respond with rationalizations about necessary sacrifice and the greater good. Some show flickers of doubt when confronted with specific atrocities, but their faith usually reasserts itself. The need to believe in their cause, overwhelming evidence that might force them to question fundamental assumptions. The journey from Bridgefort toward Dragonspear Castle takes you through the heart of territory, now effectively controlled by the Crusade. Patrols sweep constantly, forcing careful movement to avoid detection or confrontation. You observe Crusader operations from concealment, noting their discipline and organization. These are trained soldiers following coherent military doctrine, not the disorganized fanatics you might have hoped to face. Throughout this phase of travel, the hooded man appears repeatedly, always at moments when you are alone or separated from your companions. His commentary grows more pointed, focusing on how others perceive you, how quickly heroic reputation can transform into fear and suspicion. He speaks about your Ballspawn heritage as though it fascinates him, questioning what it means to carry divine essence of murder within mortal flesh. From the intensity of his interest and the nature of his questions, it is reasonable to assume he is evaluating you for purposes that have nothing to do with the Crusade, studying you as one might study a particularly interesting specimen. Evidence begins accumulating that supports the hooded man's warnings about conspiracy and betrayal. Documents captured during raids on Crusader supply convoys reference supporters within Baldur's Gate itself, families and merchant concerns providing covert assistance to Kalar's cause. Some supporters genuinely believe in her mission. Others see opportunity for profit in the chaos. A few pursue darker agendas altogether, viewing both crusade and coalition as pieces in games whose full scope remains hidden. One name appears with troubling frequency in captured correspondence: Sky Silvershield, daughter of Grand Duke Entar Silvershield, one of the very leaders who commissioned your mission. The documents suggest Sky has developed sympathies for the Crusade, or has been drawn into contact with Kaler's agents. Whether this represents genuine ideological conversion, manipulation, or something else entirely remains unclear, but the implications prove deeply troubling, suggesting that Baldur's Gate's leadership cannot fully trust even their own families. Dragonspear Castle finally appears on the horizon, its broken towers rising against the sky like monuments to previous failures. The Crusade has transformed the surrounding area into a massive military encampment. Thousands of soldiers organized in formations around fortifications that grow more elaborate daily. Supply lines stretch back northeast, bringing resources to sustain this enormous gathering. The full magnitude of what Kaler has accomplished becomes undeniable as you observe the Crusade's scale and organization. Coalition forces have also assembled, drawing troops from Baldur's Gate, Waterdeep, and other allied powers, concerned about the threat. An opened portal to the Nine Hells would represent two armies face each other across the scarred ground before Dragonspear, neither quite willing to begin the battle that will determine the Sword Coast's fate. Political considerations, fear of casualties, and simple uncertainty about how to handle a crusade that claims righteous purpose all contribute to paralysis that allows the standoff to continue. You establish operations in this tense environment, working to gather intelligence about Kaler's specific plans while preparing for whatever final confrontation awaits. The hooded man appears again, his warnings growing more urgent. Betrayal approaches, he insists, from directions you will not anticipate. The true enemy remains hidden while attention focuses on obvious threats. You must look beyond surface appearances to understand what actually drives events toward their inevitable conclusion. The weight of converging crises settles over you as you stand between armies, between the material world and the Nine Hells, whose barriers thin beneath Dragonspear's cursed stones. Kaler pursues her obsessive quest. Heffernan advances whatever hidden agenda drives his counsel. Devils wait in Avernus for opportunities mortal actions provide. Conspirators in Baldur's Gate position pieces for games whose rules you barely understand, and you, once again, find yourself at the center of chaos, expected to find paths through impossibilities, while the world watches and judges, and waits to see whether you prove savior or monster. Section 4. Descent into the Nine Hells. The siege lines tighten around Dragonspear Castle as the days turn into a standoff that grows more precarious with each passing hour. On one side, the coalition army assembled from Baldur's Gate, Waterdeep, the Flaming Fist, and allied forces, attempts to contain Kaeler's crusade and prevent the opening of a portal to Avernus. On the other, the Shining Crusade fortifies its positions around the ancient ruins, hastening preparations for the great ritual that will transform Dragonspear once again into a gateway between worlds. Just as it was during the conflicts of 1356 and 1363 Dale Reckoning, when devils emerged from its depths and had to be driven back through costly campaigns. Within this charged atmosphere, you operate not as a common soldier, but as a critical agent moving between reconnaissance, negotiation, and direct action. Your efforts in the surrounding regions, your interventions at the coast, Way Crossing and Bridgefort, and your choices in dealing with Crusader forces have shaped how both armies perceive you. Some view you as a stabilizing influence, a hero whose reputation might prevent the worst bloodshed. Others see you as a dangerous variable, a ballspawn with too much power and too little accountability. As tensions reach their breaking point, events force a final confrontation. Coalition forces prepare an assault to prevent the ritual's completion, recognizing that once Kaeler opens the portal to Avernus, consequences will cascade beyond anyone's ability to control. You find yourself at the vanguard of this desperate push, fighting through Crusader defenses toward the heart of Dragonspear Castle, where Kaeler and her inner circle conduct the final preparations. The battle through Dragonspear's ruins proves fierce and chaotic. Crusaders who still believe absolutely in their mission fight with unwavering devotion, viewing any who oppose Kaeler as enemies of cosmic justice itself. Others hesitate as rumors of darker truths begin spreading through their ranks, uncertainty weakening the absolute conviction that previously sustained them. You push forward through this confusion, your companions at your side, determined to reach the ritual chamber before events spiral completely beyond salvage. Inside the castle's deepest levels, you finally confront Heffernan in his true role. The half-elven sorcerer who has served as Kaeler's primary magical advisor reveals that his loyalty lies not with her noble goals, but with a far darker master. Heffernan openly declares his service to Belhifet, an archdevil whose name carries weight for those familiar with conflicts in the far north. Belhifet once sought to conquer the 10 Towns region, his schemes extending across multiple campaigns before heroes defeated him and drove him back to the 9 Hells. Now, through Heffernan's patient manipulation, Belhifet has engineered a new opportunity for return and conquest. The ritual Kaeler believes will allow her to march into Avernus and rescue heroic souls is actually structured to create a stable conduit that Belhifet can exploit, rather than the narrow, focused passage Kaeler envisions. The portal will provide a strategic gateway, allowing devils to move freely between planes, giving Belhifet the foothold he needs to extend his influence across the Sword Coast and beyond. Heffernan explains all this with satisfaction, revealing how completely he has manipulated Kaler's grief and obsession. Every vision she experienced showing souls suffering in Avernus, every piece of planar lore he provided, every reassurance that her plan could succeed, all of it carefully crafted to guide her toward this moment. She has been used from the beginning, her righteousness serving as cover for an infernal scheme that was never about rescuing anyone. The confrontation with Heffernan turns violent as he attempts to prevent you from reaching Kaler and revealing his betrayal before the ritual completes. The sorcerer wields formidable magical power, augmented by infernal gifts from Belhifit, deploying devastating attack spells while maintaining powerful defensive enchantments. He summons lesser devils to support his combat, the chamber becoming a maelstrom of magical energies and infernal violence. Defeating Heffernan requires everything you and your companions can bring to bear. The battle tests your tactical coordination, your ability to counter magical threats, while dealing with physical dangers from summoned devils. Victory comes at significant cost, companions suffering injuries that will require extensive healing, but eventually Heffernan falls. In the canonical course of events, however, his defeat does not end his threat. The sorcerer escapes through the very portal he has helped create, fleeing to Avernus, where his master waits. You press forward to the ritual chamber, where Kaler stands at the center of converging magical energies. The portal to Avernus begins manifesting, reality tearing open as barriers between planes thin to breaking. Kaler, consumed by her mission and unaware of Heffernan's true allegiance, continues channeling power toward the ritual's completion. She believes she stands on the threshold of achieving everything she has sacrificed for. That rescue of unjustly damned souls finally lies within reach. Your confrontation with Kaler at this critical moment can unfold in different ways depending on your choices and approach. You can engage her in combat, attempting to stop the ritual through force. You can also attempt to reason with her, presenting evidence of Heffernan's betrayal and the infernal deception at the heart of her crusade. Each approach leads toward the same inevitable outcome. The portal stabilizes and opens fully, creating a direct link between Dragonspear Castle and Avernus, the first layer of the Nine Hells. If you succeed in revealing the truth to Kaler, her response reveals the tragedy at her core. Everything she believed, every sacrifice she demanded, every atrocity committed in her name, all of it built on lies designed to manipulate her grief into serving evil. The revelation breaks something fundamental in her worldview, the absolute certainty that sustained her crumbling under the weight of undeniable truth. She must confront that her noble quest has been corrupted from its inception, that she has led thousands to serve the very forces she believed she opposed. As the portal stabilizes, you face a crucial decision. Heffernan has fled into Avernus, and Belhifit waits there to exploit the gateway his pawn has created. allowing the portal to remain open, while Devil's Mass on the other side invites catastrophe. But closing it before dealing with the infernal threat means Belhifit survives to scheme again. That all this suffering purchases only temporary respite. The only way to truly end this crisis is to follow Heffernan through the portal, to confront Belhifit in his own realm, where true death can claim him. You make the choice that defines everything following. Rather than retreat and attempt to seal the portal from the material side, you step through into Avernus itself. Your companions accompany you, loyalty and shared purpose, overcoming entirely reasonable fear of entering the 9 hells. If you have convinced Kalar of the truth, she joins you as well, determined to oppose the devil, whose manipulation turned her crusade into an instrument of evil. The transition between planes assaults your senses with overwhelming intensity. Reality twists sickeningly as you cross dimensional boundaries, the familiar laws of the material world giving way to the alien logic of the lower planes. You emerge in Avernus, and the landscape that greets you exceeds your worst expectations. Avernus stretches endlessly in all directions, a wasteland of blackened stone and rivers that flow with blood or molten metal. The sky burns with fires that cast everything in shades of crimson and shadow. The air itself tastes of sulfur and ash, each breath a reminder that you walk in a realm fundamentally hostile to mortal life. Distance and perspective shift in ways that defy normal understanding, landmarks seeming both impossibly far and threateningly close simultaneously. This is the battlefield layer of the 9 hells, where devils wage eternal war against demons from the abyss in the conflict known as the Blood War. Evidence of that endless conflict surrounds you. Lesser devils engage in brutal combat, battling each other or drilling in formations under the command of more powerful fiends. Greater devils observe from positions of authority, their mere presence radiating power and malice that makes your skin crawl. The machinery of the 9 hells operates with terrible efficiency. Souls of the damned suffering torments designed to break and reshape them into infernal servants. You witness some of those tormented souls, catching glimpses of what awaits those claimed by the 9 hells. The suffering proves almost incomprehensible in its intensity and creativity. Devils having perfected torture across countless millennia, the damned scream endlessly, their agony never killing them because death would represent mercy, and mercy has no place in this realm. They exist only to suffer, to fuel the 9 hells' economy of pain and degradation. If Kalar has joined you, she searches desperately among the tortured for the soul she came to rescue, the person whose fate drove her to this madness. But Avernus spans vast territories, holding countless damned souls. Finding one specific person among millions of suffering dead would require time and resources you do not possess. Not with Belhifit preparing to exploit the portal you came through. Belhifet reveals himself with theatrical grandeur befitting an archdevil. He manifests as a towering figure of armored might and infernal majesty, wreathed in flames that burn without consuming him. Lesser devils flee or prostrate themselves before their superior, recognizing power that dwarfs their own. Belhifet regards you and your companions with cruel satisfaction. Savoring this moment of triumph, he has engineered through decades of patient scheming. The devil explains his true plan with the pleasure of someone who has already won, and enjoys revealing exactly how thoroughly he has outmaneuvered his opponents. He never intended simple invasion through brute force, having learned from previous defeats that such direct approaches could be countered by mortal heroes. Instead, he crafted a scheme using mortal obsession and grief as weapons, turning Kaler's love and righteousness into tools that opened gates she believed she controlled. If Kaler is present, Belhifet delivers a final devastating revelation. The soul she sought to rescue was never actually in Avernus. The person she loved died heroically, their soul claimed for celestial reward rather than infernal torment. The visions she experienced showing suffering in the 9 hells were lies, illusions fed through Hefernon's magic to maintain her obsessive quest. She has sacrificed everything, led thousands to their deaths, opened portals to damnation, all based on false information designed to manipulate her into serving evil purposes. This revelation completes Kaler's destruction and reconstruction. Her entire worldview collapses as she confronts the truth that her noble quest was built on lies, that everything she did served the very evil she believed she opposed. The crusade, the suffering, all of it meaningless. But within that collapse, something new can emerge. Understanding that she has been used does not erase responsibility for what she has done, but it offers opportunity for genuine redemption rather than the false salvation her crusade promised. Belhifet allows no time for extended grief or philosophical contemplation. He launches his assault, attempting to destroy you before moving through the portal to begin his conquest of the material plane. Devils mass at the portal's edge, preparing to pour through in numbers that will overwhelm mortal resistance. The Sword Coast's fate depends entirely on whether you can defeat Belhifet here and close the portal before his forces complete their crossing. The battle that follows exceeds anything you have previously experienced in scale and intensity. Belhifet wields power accumulated across centuries of existence, divine might corrupted into infernal purposes. He commands legions of lesser devils who support their master while engaging your companions. The battlefield becomes chaos incarnate, magic and steel, infernal fire, and desperate heroism colliding in combat that will determine countless lives' fates. If Kaler fights beside you, her presence proves crucial. She channels the full strength of her celestial heritage and martial training against the devil who manipulated her. Her blessed weapons strike at Belhifet with renewed purpose, each blow driven not by deluded certainty, but by genuine desire to undo some portion of the harm her obsession enabled. She has finally found the righteous battle she always sought, recognizing true evil and opposing it with everything she possesses. The combined assault gradually pushes Belhifet toward defeat, despite his tremendous advantages fighting on home ground. Your companions contribute their abilities, magic, and prowess combining to overwhelm the Archdevil's defenses. Belhifet's cruel satisfaction transforms into rage as he realizes these mortals might actually achieve the impossible and destroy him in his own realm. In the lore of the plains, devils slain in the 9 hells suffer true death rather than mere banishment. Their essences unravel, consciousness ceasing permanently rather than reforming to scheme again. Your battle with Belhifet draws on this principle, each blow potentially delivering final destruction rather than temporary setback. When you finally land the killing strike, Belhifet's death scream echoes across Avernus, a sound of such rage and anguish that lesser devils flee in terror. The Archdevil's form dissolves, his essence scattering as true oblivion claims him. But victory over Belhifet does not automatically resolve the portal crisis. The magical gateway between Dragonspear and Avernus remains open, energies still binding the planes together. The portal will not simply close on its own. Someone must complete a counter-ritual or sacrifice tremendous power to sever the connection and repair reality's torn fabric. In the canonical resolution, Kalar offers herself for this final sacrifice. She recognizes that her life, her celestial essence, can fuel the magic needed to close the portal permanently. She insists this represents appropriate justice, that her death in service to undoing her mistakes offers the only meaningful redemption available to someone who caused such catastrophic harm. She has come to Avernus seeking to rescue a soul that was never here. Instead, she can save countless souls by preventing the infernal invasion her crusade nearly enabled. You could refuse, could search for alternative methods that do not require her sacrifice. But time pressures allow no leisurely consideration. Devils still mass near the portal, and without Belhifet's immediate control, they grow more chaotic and dangerous. Kalar's offer represents the surest path to preventing disaster. Her willingness to die acknowledging responsibility for the crisis her obsession created. Kalar completes the sealing ritual, channeling power through her own essence to close the dimensional breach. The portal begins contracting, energies stabilizing as reality repairs itself. She screams as the magic consumes her, pain beyond mortal endurance preceding death. But she maintains focus, refusing to allow agony to prevent completion of her final act. The portal shrinks toward closure, cutting off the 9 hell's access to the material plane. In her last moments, Kalar achieves the peace that eluded her throughout her obsessive quest. She saves souls, though not the specific souls she originally sought. She prevents the damnation of thousands who would have fallen to Belhifet's invasion. She rights the cosmic wrong she committed through her actions, even if she cannot undo the wrong she believed drove her crusade. Death claims her as the portal closes completely, her sacrifice ensuring that the 9 hells remain separated from the material world. You and your companions find yourselves pulled through the closing portal in its final moments, ejected from Avernus back to the material plane. You collapse in the ritual chamber beneath Dragonspear Castle, exhausted, wounded, but alive. Around you, the crusade dissolves into chaos as word spreads of what happened. As soldiers and followers learn that their leader is dead, that their cause was built on deception, that they served manipulation rather than justice. The immediate crisis has passed. Belhifet is destroyed. The portal is sealed. The Sword Coast has been saved from infernal invasion. But as you stand among the ruins of Dragonspear Castle, gathering strength to face whatever comes next, you begin to sense that your trials are far from over. Victory over devils does not guarantee gratitude from mortals, especially mortals who fear what you represent. The real test, you will soon discover, lies not in the 9 hells you have escaped, but in the political and social consequences waiting in the world you saved. Section 5. Aftermath and Eternal Echoes. The return to the surface world feels like awakening from a nightmare that refuses to fully release its grip. You emerge from Dragonspear Castle's depths into gray daylight, your body bearing wounds from battle in the 9 hells, your mind struggling to process the transition from Avernus back to the material plane. The Crusade's camps surrounding the castle have descended into chaos as news spreads of Kaeler's death and the truth of Hefernon's betrayal. Thousands of crusaders find themselves suddenly without purpose, their righteous certainty shattered by revelations that they served manipulation rather than justice. Some crusaders flee immediately, desperate to distance themselves from the crusade before consequences arrive. They scatter in all directions, abandoning weapons and banners, seeking to disappear into the countryside before anyone can hold them accountable for their participation in a movement that brought so much suffering. Others remain in stunned paralysis, unable to process how completely they were deceived, how thoroughly their faith was exploited. Still, others turn violent, rage and denial driving them to attack anyone nearby, refusing to accept that their sacrifices served evil purposes. Coalition forces move to secure the area. Flaming Fist soldiers and allied troops establishing order among the dissolving Crusader army. They take prisoners by the hundreds, separating those who surrender peacefully from those who continue resisting. The logistical challenge of managing thousands of defeated Crusaders, of determining who bears responsibility for atrocities and who merely followed in misguided faith, will occupy authorities for months to come. Grand Duke Entar Silvershield arrives at Dragonspear within days of the portal's closure, leading a delegation of Baldur's Gate officials to assess the situation and coordinate the aftermath. He greets you with expressions of gratitude and relief, publicly acknowledging your role in preventing catastrophe. You saved the Sword Coast from infernal invasion, defeated an archdevil in his own realm, accomplished feats that seemed impossible by any reasonable measure. You have performed heroic service deserving of celebration and reward. The Grand Duke promises official recognition, substantial compensation for your efforts, eternal gratitude from Baldur's Gate's citizens and leadership. He speaks of parades and ceremonies, of your name being recorded in the city's histories alongside other great heroes. The words sound genuine, his relief at the crisis's resolution clear in his voice and manner. For a brief moment, standing in victory's immediate aftermath, it seems you have finally earned the peace and security your service should warrant. But even during these early declarations of triumph, undercurrents suggest darker developments ahead. You notice certain officers watching you with expressions that mix respect with unease. Whispers circulate among the soldiers. Speculation about what traveling to the Nine Hells and returning might mean. Whether someone who walked in Avernus can truly remain uncorrupted. The seeds of future troubles begin germinating, even as official voices proclaim your heroism. The immediate aftermath requires managing the humanitarian crisis created by the Crusades' collapse. Thousands of Crusaders who abandoned their previous lives now face uncertain futures. Communities they left may not welcome their return. Families they alienated may not forgive their choices. Jobs and homes they abandoned have been filled by others. These people must somehow rebuild lives after dedicating themselves to obsessive delusion, must find ways forward after everything they believed proved false. Some Crusaders genuinely repent, recognizing the harm they caused and seeking to make amends however possible. They volunteer for reconstruction efforts, providing labor to rebuild settlements their army destroyed. They offer testimony about the Crusades' operations, helping authorities identify conspirators and uncover the full extent of manipulation that enabled Kaler's army to grow so large. These repentant crusaders face uncertain futures, but at least demonstrate willingness to accept responsibility for their actions. Others refuse to acknowledge wrongdoing, insisting they served righteously even if specific details were manipulated. They argue that fighting cosmic injustice remains noble regardless of whether particular souls were actually in danger, that their intentions justified their actions. These unrepentant crusaders prove troublesome, their continued belief in righteousness suggesting potential for future extremism. Authorities must decide whether such individuals deserve punishment, rehabilitation, or monitoring to prevent them from forming new dangerous movements. You participate in debriefings with Baldur's Gate's leadership, providing detailed accounts of everything you witnessed and learned. You describe Hefernon's betrayal, Belhifet's manipulation, the conspiracy that reached into Baldur's Gate itself through covert supporters. You present evidence of collaboration, naming those you identified as providing assistance to Kaeler's crusade. The Grand Dukes receive this information with varying reactions, some shocked by the depth of betrayal, others grimly unsurprised that such conspiracy occurred. As days pass and you remain in the Dragonspear area, assisting with aftermath management, you begin noticing growing discomfort in how people interact with you. The initial gratitude starts mixing with suspicion and fear. You traveled to the 9 hells and returned, an accomplishment without clear precedent. Speculation grows about what such an experience might have done to you, whether infernal corruption might have claimed you despite your heroic actions, from the way people increasingly avoid direct eye contact or make excuses to cut conversations short. This could imply that your victory has paradoxically made you more threatening in their eyes. Your Ballspawn heritage, previously known to relatively few, begins circulating more widely through rumor and gossip. People learn that you carry the essence of Baal, the dead god of murder, that you share blood with Servok and potentially hundreds of other children of the murder god scattered across Faerun. This knowledge transforms how people perceive you, introducing fear where there was previously only respect or neutral acknowledgement. You become not just a hero, but a potential threat, someone whose power and nature might turn dangerous without warning. Then comes the murder that changes everything. Sky Silvershield, daughter of Grand Duke and Tar Silvershield, is found dead under circumstances that immediately draw attention to you. The young noblewoman's body is discovered in circumstances that seem to implicate you, though the evidence contains obvious inconsistencies that any competent investigation would recognize. But fear and prejudice overwhelm logic. You become the prime suspect. Officers who respected you hours earlier now regarding you with open hostility. Based on what unfolds, it becomes clear that someone has deliberately orchestrated this murder and the evidence trail leading to you. The setup is too convenient, the timing too perfect, the way it exploits existing fears about your nature too calculated to be coincidence. Someone wants you discredited, wants your heroism overshadowed by accusations of the worst crime imaginable. Someone benefits from transforming you from savior into monster in the public imagination. The hooded man appears again during this crisis, warning that the murder represents exactly the kind of betrayal he predicted. Forces within Baldur's Gate itself orchestrated Sky's death, using it as a weapon against you because they fear what you represent. They cannot control you through normal means, cannot predict or manage someone with your power and independence. Better to eliminate you through legal proceedings or mob violence than risk what you might do if you recognized how thoroughly you threaten their carefully maintained order. From the way events unfold with such precision, this strongly suggests that the conspiracy reaches into Baldur's Gate's highest levels, that people you believed were allies have been working against you throughout. The murder was never about Sky herself, but about creating the narrative needed to destroy you. Her death serves political purposes that have nothing to do with justice and everything to do with eliminating inconvenient power. Despite lack of solid evidence, pressure builds inexorably toward your arrest and trial. The murdered noblewoman's status as the Grand Duke's daughter makes the case politically explosive. Her father, whatever his personal beliefs about your guilt or innocence, faces overwhelming pressure to demonstrate that justice applies even to heroes, that no one stands above accountability, regardless of past service. Public demands for someone to blame grow louder, fed by agitators who may or may not understand their role in larger conspiracies. Your companions rally to your defense, providing alibis and challenging the evidence. Jaira uses her Harper connections to investigate independently, uncovering information suggesting professional assassination rather than crime of passion. Other allies pressure Baldur's Gate's leadership to conduct proper investigation rather than rushing to judgment. But their efforts prove insufficient against the tide of fear and political necessity driving events toward predetermined conclusion. You face trial in Baldur's Gate, a public spectacle designed as much to satisfy political pressures as to determine actual guilt or innocence. The proceedings unfold with barely concealed predetermination. Witnesses testify to inconsistencies in evidence. Your defenders present compelling arguments about your character and service. But the outcome feels inevitable from the first moments. The court preparing to sacrifice you to public demands for someone to blame for multiple crises' accumulated traumas. The verdict delivers a guilty finding, though the exact sentence remains somewhat ambiguous in the chaos that follows. What is clear is that you are condemned, your heroism erased in favor of a narrative that positions you as a dangerous ballspawn whose true nature finally revealed itself through murder. The injustice of this judgment proves obvious to anyone examining evidence objectively. But objective examination matters less than political necessity and fear-driven scapegoating. Your companions engineer your escape from custody, recognizing that remaining in Baldur's Gate means either execution or indefinite imprisonment based on false charges. The escape occurs during chaotic circumstances that allow you to flee, while your rescuers create diversions. You become a fugitive, hunted by the same authorities you served so faithfully, forced to abandon whatever life you attempted to build in the Sword Coast. This betrayal serves as the bridge between your triumph over Servok and the journey that will define your existence in the years ahead. The relatively clear moral landscape of your early adventures gives way to more ambiguous reality, where heroism brings punishment rather than reward, where power and heritage mark you as threat regardless of how you choose to use them. The world proves more complicated and cruel than simple frameworks of good versus evil can accommodate. Your exile from Baldur's Gate forces reflection on everything you have experienced. You are a Ballspawn, child of a dead god of murder, carrying essence that connects you to hundreds of siblings scattered across the world. This heritage has shaped events from before your birth, drawing you into conflicts you never chose. Servoc's conspiracy, the Crusades' manipulation, the betrayal in Baldur's Gate, all connect to larger patterns surrounding children of Baal and those who seek to use or destroy them. The hooded man's warnings take on new significance as you recognize the depth of forces operating around you. Based on his consistent interest in your nature, your power, your reactions to betrayal and suffering, it is reasonable to assume he represents one of those forces, that his observations serve purposes extending far beyond the immediate crises you have navigated. He has been studying you, evaluating you, perhaps preparing you for something yet to come. Your relationships with companions evolve through these trials. Shared hardship forges bonds deeper than casual friendship, connections based on demonstrated loyalty under impossible circumstances. You learn which allies remain steadfast when supporting you becomes costly, who values honor above expediency. These relationships will sustain you through darker times ahead, providing foundation of trust in a world where betrayal seems commonplace. The broader impact on the Forgotten Realms extends beyond immediate political or military consequences. The Shining Crusade demonstrated how easily noble intentions become corrupted, how grief and obsession can be weaponized by those with darker agendas. Kaler's tragedy serves as warning about dangers of absolute certainty, about how conviction unchecked by wisdom leads to catastrophe. Her story will be told for generations as cautionary tale about the price of refusing to accept tragic realities. For you personally, the events surrounding Dragonspear represent transformation from relatively innocent adventurer into someone who understands the multiverse's darker complexities at visceral level. You have walked in the 9 hells and survived. You have witnessed how good intentions pave roads to damnation. You have experienced betrayal from those you served faithfully. These experiences harden you while also threatening to erode the idealism that once motivated your heroism. Yet hope persists despite everything. You survived the 9 hells. You defeated Belhifit. You maintained honor even when falsely accused and unjustly convicted. These accomplishments matter regardless of how poorly the world rewards them. Your companions remain loyal. Your abilities continue developing. The path forward remains uncertain, but not impossible. Future still containing possibility, even in darker circumstances that await. The siege of Dragonspear represents more than historical event or personal trial. It embodies eternal themes about the nature of heroism, the corruption of noble causes, the price of obsession, and the injustice of a world where those who sacrifice most often receive least gratitude. Kaler's tragedy, your persecution, the Crusaders' manipulation, all illustrate fundamental truths about existence in a universe where gods remain distant and evil wears righteousness's mask convincingly. As you depart the Sword Coast, with whatever companions still stand beside you, leaving behind the only home you have known, you carry these lessons forward into unknown future. The road ahead promises greater dangers and darker revelations. Your Ballspawn heritage will draw you into conflicts that dwarf even the Crusades' magnitude. But you face these challenges with experience earned through trials already survived, with bonds proven through shared hardship, with determination forged in fires of betrayal and persecution. Somewhere ahead, in the nation of Am, new trials await. The hooded man who has observed you throughout these events will reveal himself fully, his purposes finally becoming clear in ways that will test everything you believe about yourself and your capacity to remain who you choose to be rather than what your heritage demands. But that is a story for another time, another journey that begins where this one ends. The story continues, as stories always do for those who survive to tell them. Your legend grows despite attempts to tarnish it, spreading beyond Baldur's gate to lands where people hungry for heroes remember those who fight darkness regardless of personal cost. And in the shadows, forces continue maneuvering, positioning pieces for conflicts yet to come, waiting for the next crisis that will test whether you possess strength to remain heroic when the world itself seems determined to punish such nobility. If you enjoyed exploring the complete lore of Baldur's Gate, Siege of Dragonspear, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the rich history and stories of Dungeons and Dragons. Your support helps me continue creating these detailed explorations of the Forgotten Realms and the legendary tales that shape this incredible universe. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the most tragic and compelling chapters in Baldur's Gate's history.